All right, I've opened up that index.html file inside my browser. Once I have that file open, I'm then going to open up my development console. I'm going to keep this open for a lot of the code that we're going to write because we're going to use a couple of different tools inside of here just to get a better idea of the application that we're trying to build. I'm then going to go back over to my editor and find the index.js file. Inside of here, I'm just going to do a very quick console log and say, hi there, then save the file, go back over to the browser and refresh, and just make sure I see the console log. I would just like you to do that to make sure that the JavaScript file got wired up successfully. Okay, so once we verify that everything is ready to go, we can start working on our application. I think that the first thing we should do is try to just show a very simple form to the user, like the one that we see right here. Once we add in the form, we can then add in an event listener to it and watch for a submit event. So as soon as the user submits this form right here, we'll update some HTML and show the share a link with friend text and show the text input with the link to copy inside of it as well. So first, let's add in some HTML for the form element. I'll go back over to my index.html file. Inside of here, we're going to add in a pretty good amount of HTML. A lot of the HTML that we're going to be writing is going to use some class names and styling that we get from this materialized CSS library. So if it looks like I'm adding in a bunch of extra HTML and class names, it's just for styling purposes. Okay, so inside of here, I'm going to create a div with the class of row. Then inside there, I'm going to create a div with the class of col s8 offset -s2. So this class right here with that kind of funny class name is just going to make sure that we've got some centered content on the screen. Inside of there, I'll create a div with the class of card-panel. This is going to give us an element that kind of looks like a card with a nice shadow behind it, again, just for styling purposes. Then finally inside of there, I can create a form. Inside the form, I'll display a label that tells my user exactly what I would like them to do inside of my app. So I'm going to tell them, enter a secret message. Then after that, I'll display an input that the user can enter some text into. And then finally, a button with the class of btn. And inside the button element, I'll say to the user, create, or create link, or whatever else would be appropriate. But I think the word create is pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I'll go back over, refresh, and there we go. So we can see that the nice outline here we get from that card panel class. The element itself is centered on the screen because of that COL and the offset S2 and S8 classes that we added right around it. So now we want to make sure that whenever a user enters in some text here and clicks on create, we detect that submit event and handle it appropriately. So let's make sure that we wire up a submit event handler on that form element that we just created. To do so, I'll go back over to my index.js file. I'm going to remove the console log. Then inside of here, I'm going to add a query selector for the form we just created. So document.querySelector form. I'll do add event listener. And I'll watch for the submit event. And then as a second argument, I'll pass in a callback function to run anytime that a user submits that form. Remember that the callback function gets called with an event object. The event object we really only care about, so we can call event.prevent default on it. So just as a quick reminder, the way that the browser works by default is anytime that you submit a form, the browser is going to take all the information inside that form and automatically attempt to submit it to some backend server. In our case, we don't have any backend server to receive that information. So we're going to call prevent default to stop the default browser behavior, which is to submit the form. So now if I save this, if I go back over, refresh, enter some text, and hit create, I should not see the page refresh or anything like that. If the page is refreshing, that means that the browser is still attempting to submit the form, which is, again, not what we want. Okay, so then inside of here, let's just write out a little bit of code to try to get the text inside of that text input. I'm going to first just try to select the input with a selector. So I'll say const input is document.querySelector input, and I'll just do a console log of the message that I want to eventually somehow encode and turn into a sort of secret message. So I can get that with input.value, like so. Okay, so let's save this. I'll go back over. I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to test out the submittal. So I'll put in a secret message. I'll hit create. And I see the console log right there of exactly what I just had inside the text input. Very good. Okay, so let's take a pause right here. When we come back in just a moment, we're going to figure out how we can somehow take that value right there, whatever the user just entered, and somehow encode it into some secret string. So I'll see you in just a minute.